What if I told you your best years are still ahead? Hello, my dear friend, if you're over 50, 60, 70 years old. If you sometimes look in the mirror and wonder, what's my purpose now? If you feel your prime has passed, this video will completely change your perspective on what aging truly means. I know how it feels. I know the ache when children leave home, when retirement comes, when society treats you as invisible. I know what it's like to wake up some days feeling you have nothing important left to do. But what if I told you about an 89-year-old nun who still wakes at 5 a.m. to care for hundreds of abandoned elders? About a 74-year-old engineer who transformed an entire favela through education? About a 69-year-old nurse traveling across Brazil bringing hope to those in need? My friend, you're not at the end of your story. You might be at the beginning of your life's most important chapter. In the next few minutes, I'll introduce you to 8 extraordinary people who proved age isn't a limitation. It's liberation. People, like you and me, who discovered that serving others doesn't just transform lives, it transforms the server. I promise, when you finish watching, you'll never see your age the same way again. You'll find treasures within you waiting to be shared with the world. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and prepare to rediscover the giant within you. Your transformation journey starts now. The transformative power of service, my dear. Friends, before we meet these incredible stories, we must understand something fundamental: why serving becomes even more meaningful in our later years. There's unique beauty in senior volunteering. It's when we finally have the wisdom of experience, the patience only time can bring, and often, the time once consumed by work demands. Scientific studies prove that seniors who volunteer live longer, are happier, and have significantly better mental health. But this isn't just statistics. It's a truth we can feel in our hearts. When we serve, magic happens. We stop being the center of our own universe and connect to something greater. The emptiness we sometimes feel after retirement, or when children leave, gets filled with renewed purpose. Service reminds us we still have much to offer. Our hands may be wrinkled, our steps slower, but our hearts can be infinitely generous. And the most beautiful part? When we serve with love, we don't just help others, we heal ourselves too. It's a sacred exchange where everyone wins. Magda, the nun of the forgotten. Now I want to tell you the story of an extraordinary woman who dedicated over 50 years of her life to those in need. Her name is Sister Magda, and she's known as the Nun of the Forgotten. Magda was just 20 years old when she decided to devote her life to religious service. But it was at 65, when many would think of retiring, that she found her true calling. On the streets of São Paulo, she saw something that moved her deeply. Abandoned elderly people, living under bridges, forgotten by society and even their own families. At 65, Sister Magda founded the Home for Abandoned Elders. It started small, with just 3 seniors she literally picked up from the streets. Today, at 89, her institution has sheltered over 2,000 abandoned elders. But what moves me most about Sister Magda's story isn't just the numbers. It's how she treats every person who comes to her. She once told me, "Every elder I take in isn't just someone who needs a roof and food. They're someone who needs to feel they still matter, that they're still loved." Imagine, a woman nearly 90 years old who still wakes at 5 a.m. every day, still visits each room, still holds the hands of those who arrive scared and hopeless. She proves that service has no retirement age. When I asked her secret to keeping her energy, she smiled and said, "My child, when you find your mission, age becomes just a number. It's the heart that leads." José Carlos Silva, the teacher of the favela. Now let me tell you about José Carlos Silva, a man who transformed his retirement into one of the most beautiful educational missions I've ever seen. José Carlos was a civil engineer. He spent 40 years building skyscrapers and bridges. When he retired at 62, he could have chosen a quiet life, gardening, traveling, resting. But José Carlos looked at his life and asked a powerful question. What can I build now that truly matters? The answer came when he visited a favela in Recife and saw children playing in trash, with no school, no future. At 62, José Carlos decided to build the most important project of his life, a free school in the heart of the community. He started by teaching math under a tree. Yes, literally under a tree. 5 children on the first day. 12 years later, his school now serves over 300 children and teens. But what amazes me about José Carlos isn't just the physical structure he built. It's how he built hope. Many of his first students are now in college. Some have graduated and returned as volunteer teachers at the same school. José Carlos told me something unforgettable. "Professor, I spent 40 years building with bricks and cement. Now I'm building with dreams and knowledge, and I can promise you this construction will last much longer." Today at 74, he's still there every day, teaching math, but more importantly, teaching that it's never too late to start over, never too late to dream. Dona Maria Helena, the mother of orphans. I want to share with you the story of a woman who completely redefined the meaning of motherhood. Her name is Maria Helena Santos, and at 58 years old, when her own children were already grown, she decided to become a mother again, to hundreds of children. Maria Helena was a retired nurse. A widow with 3 married children, she could have settled into the role of a devoted grandmother. But destiny had other plans. During a visit to an orphanage in Salvador, she encountered a reality that would change her life forever. There were over 200 children living in precarious conditions, with few staff and limited resources. But what struck her most wasn't the physical state of the place. It was the look in those children's eyes. A gaze thirsty for affection, for attention, for a mother's love. That day at 58, Maria Helena made a decision that would alter not just her life, but hundreds of children's lives. She moved into the orphanage, literally, sold her house, donated her furniture, and turned a small room at the orphanage into her new home. For the past 15 years, Dona Maria Helena, as she's affectionately called, has cared for more than 500 children. She follows every adoption, stays in touch with families, and many of those children, now adults, still call her mom. What moves me most is how she treats each child, not as a number but as her own. She knows every name, every story, every fear, every dream. When I asked why she made such a radical choice, she looked at me with eyes full of love and said, "My child, God gave me children when I was young. Now, in my later years, He's given me the chance to be a mother to all who need one. How could I refuse such a gift?" Mr. Antonio, the gardener of hope. Now, a story that proves transforming lives doesn't require grand gestures or abundant resources. Sometimes all it takes is a seed, good soil, and a lot of love. This is the story of 71-year-old Antonio Ferreira. Antonio always loved plants. For 35 years, he worked as a gardener for wealthy families. When he retired at 65, many assumed he'd finally take a break from gardening. They were wrong. Antonio looked around his impoverished community in Belo Horizonte and saw something that troubled him deeply. Young people with no prospects, using drugs, caught in violence. But where others saw only problems, Antonio saw an opportunity. He decided to create a community garden on an abandoned lot. At 65, he started alone, clearing the land, preparing the soil, planting the first seedlings. Passers-by pitied him. Poor old man's lost his mind. But something magical happened. The first to show interest were children, then curious teenagers. Soon, young men who once lingered on street corners came to help. 6 years later, Mr. Antonio's garden is a true oasis in the community. Over 50 families participate. The same youths who once caused worry now lead planting groups. Some discovered a passion for agriculture and now work in the field. But what amazes me most isn't the tomatoes, lettuce, or herbs they grow. It's how Antonio planted hope in those young hearts. He often says, "Planting is an act of faith. You bury a seed believing it will sprout, grow, and bear fruit." That's what I do with these kids. Plant seeds of hope. Antonio proved we don't need vast resources to make vast differences. Sometimes all it takes is a handful of dirt, a few seeds, and a generous heart willing to believe in people. Duna Conceição, the seamstress of dreams. Now I want to tell you the story of a woman who turned her simple skill into a powerful tool for social change. This is the story of Conceição Oliveira, 68 years old, known in her community as the seamstress of dreams. Conceição sewed her entire life. She started as a child helping her mother make clothes to sell. She married, had children, and always kept her sewing machine as a faithful companion, supplementing the family income. When she retired at 60, she could have packed away her sewing machine and rested her hands, weary from decades of work. But Conceição looked around her community and saw something that troubled her. Young mothers without the means to buy clothes for their babies. That's when she had a simple yet revolutionary idea. She began collecting fabric scraps from stores and ateliers, leftovers that would have been thrown away. With these scraps, she started sewing clothes for babies and children, which she gave away for free to mothers in need. What began as a personal gesture grew into a true solidarity network. Other women in the community joined her. Today, Dona Conceição's Solidarity Needle Project has helped over 2,000 families. But what moves me most about this story is seeing how Conceição doesn't just give away clothes, she gives hope. She told me about a young mother who came to her in tears because she had nothing to dress her soon-to-be-born baby. Conceição not only prepared a complete layette, but also taught the young woman to sew. Today, that woman runs her own sewing workshop and employs other women from the community. Look at this, Conceição told me. I thought I'd just be sewing little clothes, but I ended up sewing lives, sewing dreams, sewing futures. At 68, she's still there every day, her machine humming, turning scraps into hope, proving that our skills, no matter how simple they seem, can be powerful instruments of transformation. Professor João, the neighborhood librarian. Now I want to share the story of a man who proved that knowledge is the greatest gift we can give. This is the story of João Batista Souza, 72 years old, a retired teacher who turned his garage into one of the most important libraries in his community. Professor João, as he's affectionately called, dedicated 35 years of his life to public education. He always believed in the transformative power of learning, but grew frustrated by the lack of resources in the schools where he worked. When he retired at 65, he could have simply closed the education chapter of his life. But Professor João looked at the thousands of books he'd collected over the years and had an epiphany. Those books couldn't just gather dust on shelves. He decided to turn his garage into a community library. He cataloged over 3,000 books, organized them by subject, created a lending system, and opened the doors to everyone, all at 65 years old. But Professor João didn't stop there. He started reading circles for children, study groups for teens, preparing for college entrance exams, and even a book club for adults. What amazes me most is how he treats every visitor, whether it's a 7-year-old looking for a storybook or an adult learning to read. Professor João welcomes everyone with the same warmth and dedication. He told me about a 12-year-old boy who came to him struggling to read. For months, Professor João worked patiently with him until the boy discovered the joy of books. Today, that child is one of the top students in his school. Professor, he told me, I spent 35 years teaching within 4 walls. Now, at 72, I'm teaching without limits. Every book that leaves this library carries a piece of my soul and can change a life. Professor João's library has loaned over 50,000 books and served thousands of people. He proved that retirement can be the beginning of our greatest contribution to the world. Dona Ruth, the nurse without borders. I want to tell you the story of a woman who completely redefined the concept of retirement. This is the story of Ruth Cardoso, 69 years old, a nurse who decided her calling to care for others wouldn't end. When she hung up her scrubs, Ruth worked as a nurse for 42 years. She served in maternity wards, ICUs, emergency rooms. She witnessed births, deaths, suffering, and healing. When retirement came at 62, everyone expected her to finally rest. But Ruth had a different vision. She looked at her experience and thought, "How can I waste 42 years of knowledge sitting at home?" The answer came when she learned about an NGO, bringing medical care to underserved communities. At 62, Ruth volunteered for their expeditions. Imagine, a woman who could be knitting for her grandchildren chose instead to travel dirt roads, sleep in hammocks, and bring medical care to those who need it most. In the last 7 years, Ruth has joined over 100 missions. She's served in indigenous villages, riverside communities, and urban slums. She estimates she's treated more than 10,000 people. What moves me most about Ruth's story is how she treats every patient. Whether it's a child with fever in a remote Amazon village or an elderly diabetic in a favela, each receives the same care, the same attention, the same love. Ruth told me about delivering a baby in a riverside community that hadn't seen a doctor in months. "When I held that newborn," she said, "I understood my retirement wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. I was no longer bound by hospital protocols. I could simply care." At 69, Ruth still embarks on missions with the energy of someone who's found her true purpose. She proves that the call to heal has no expiration date, and that the wisdom of age may be our greatest gift to the world. Mr. Benedito, the storyteller. Now, a story that proves our greatest wealth sometimes lies in the experiences we've lived and the stories we carry. This is the story of Benedito Santos, 78 years old, known in his community as Mr. Benedito the storyteller. Mr. Benedito lived a full life. He was a bricklayer, a salesman, a bus driver. He traveled across Brazil, met people from all walks of life, and had adventures worthy of novels. With each job, each city, he collected not just memories, but narrative treasures waiting to blossom. On construction sites, he witnessed workers sharing their last piece of bread. As a salesman, he met families fighting hardship with dignity. Behind the wheel, he became a confidant to passengers sharing their joys and sorrows during long cross-country trips. When he retired at 70, Mr. Benedito felt useless. "What good is an old man with nothing but stories?" he'd wonder, watching life pass by his window. The days felt endless for this man whose hands were always busy. The answer came unexpectedly when his 8-year-old granddaughter asked for a bedtime story. That night, Mr. Benedito told of traveling through Brazil's northeast and meeting a cowboy who tamed wild horses. He described the scorching heat, the sound of hooves on dry earth, the cowboy's fearless way with animals. The girl was mesmerized. The next day, she brought friends. Within weeks, his living room became a theater for neighborhood children. Thus began the Tell Me a Story project. Mr. Benedito started visiting schools, daycares, and libraries. But these weren't just stories. They were life lessons in disguise. Tales of cowboys taught courage. Construction site memories taught solidarity. What amazes me most is how he captivates children in this age of tablets and video games. No special effects, just his voice, his gestures, and decades of experience. His calloused hands paint pictures in the air. His deep voice mimics wind, waves, and wildlife. He told me about a shy girl who never spoke until she whispered, "Mr. Benedito, I have a story too." It was about her grandmother's cornbread and how much she missed her. "That's when I understood," he said tearfully. "My job isn't just telling stories. It's awakening the storyteller in every child." He realized he was planting seeds that would grow into future narratives. For 8 years now, Mr. Benedito has shared stories with over 5,000 children. He's become a local legend, a man who transforms any space into something magical with words alone. Teachers report remarkable changes in students after his visits. Shy children speak up. Others discover reading. Many start writing their own stories. At 78, Mr. Benedito no longer feels useless. He's a keeper of memories, a bridge between generations, a professor of life. When children ask if his stories are true, he smiles. What matters isn't whether it happened, but whether it happens inside you when I tell it. The greatest lesson: we can all make a difference. My dear friends, we've come to the end of this moving journey, but I want to leave you with the most important lesson these stories teach us. Each of these people, Sister Magda, José Carlos, Dona Maria Helena, Mr. Antônio, Dona Conceição, Professor João, Dona Ruth, and Mr. Benedito, they weren't superheroes. They were ordinary people who made an extraordinary choice to use their wisdom, their experience, and their time to serve others. Did you notice something all these stories have in common? None of these people waited until they had abundant resources, perfect conditions, or someone's permission to begin. They simply started where they were, with what they had. If you're listening now and wondering, but what can I do? I don't have special skills, I don't have resources. Let me tell you something. You already have the most precious thing in the world, a heart capable of love and hands ready to help. You know what I've learned over the years? Age doesn't take away our abilities, it gives us new ones. Your legs may not be as quick as they once were, but your ears know how to listen like no one else. Your physical strength may have faded, but your patience has grown infinitely. Maybe you can teach a child to read, like Professor João. Maybe you can cook for someone in need. Maybe you can simply listen to someone who needs to be heard. Maybe you can plant a garden like Mr. Antonio, or tell stories like Mr. Benedito. You could visit a nursing home and talk to someone who never gets visitors. You could teach your recipes to a young mother. You could help a child with homework in your building. You could organize a prayer group, or just smile at a lonely neighbor. My friend, you don't have to change the whole world. You only need to change one person's world. And when you do that, something magical happens. Your own world transforms too. What matters isn't the size of the gesture, but the size of the love we put into it. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. Do you know the greatest gift God gives us in our later years? Time. Time to truly see people. Time to really listen. Time to love without hurry. Time to make a difference without the rush of youth. Remember, maturity isn't an ending. It's a new beginning. It's when we have the wisdom of experience, the freedom of time, and the chance to leave a truly meaningful legacy. And the most beautiful part? When you serve, when you help, when you love, you're not just giving, you're receiving. You feel the joy of purpose, the knowledge that you're still needed, that you still matter. Living to serve isn't just a noble choice. It's the path to a fulfilling, meaningful life, forever young at heart. It's the secret to waking up every day with a smile, knowing you have an important mission in this world. So I challenge you, my dear friend. This week, do one act of love for someone. It can be small, it can be simple, but do it. And notice how your heart fills with a joy you may have long forgotten. You're not at the end of your story. You might be at the start of the most beautiful chapter of your life. And if, after watching this, you feel inspired, if you decide to do something for someone, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story of love and service. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May these stories inspire you to write your own story of love and service. Until next time, and remember, it's never too late to make a difference. It's never too late to love. If this video touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories to inspire your life. Your likes and comments motivate me to keep spreading hope to people like you.